Benjamin Franklin is often remembered as a genial inventor and witty statesman, yet his influence extended far beyond lightning rods and clever aphorisms. He shaped revolutions without commanding armies, negotiated alliances without formal authority, and cultivated a public image that concealed strategic calculation. Was Franklin simply a brilliant polymath or a figure who understood power in subtler ways than his contemporaries? How did one man move so easily between science, diplomacy, and political manipulation? And what role did reputation itself play in his success? In this video, we're going to examine this story in detail and uncover what history usually leaves out. Franklin's rise began not in courts or universities, but in print shops and coffee houses. Born into modest circumstances, he understood early that influence in the modern world flowed through information. As a printer and publisher, he learned how ideas circulated, how public opinion formed, and how narratives could be shaped. His essays, pseudonymous letters, and satirical pieces were not merely entertainment, they were exercises in persuasion. Franklin learned how to sound reasonable, humorous, and approachable while advancing clear political and social positions. This skill would later become one of his greatest diplomatic assets. His scientific work brought him international recognition, but it also served a political function. Experiments with electricity made Franklin famous in Europe at a time when science conferred prestige across national boundaries. He presented himself not as a provincial colonist, but as a man of the Enlightenment, fluent in its values and methods. Some historians argue that Franklin understood the symbolic power of science better than most. His discoveries enhanced his credibility, granting him access to intellectual and political circles that would otherwise have been closed to an American colonial subject. Franklin's time in London before the Revolution reveals another dimension of his character. Initially loyal to the British Empire, he worked to reconcile colonial grievances within imperial structures. He lobbied Parliament, wrote pamphlets defending colonial rights, and believed compromise was possible. His break with Britain was gradual, shaped by humiliation, frustration, and shifting political realities. The famous moment when he was publicly reprimanded before the Privy Council marked a turning point. Franklin later suggested that the experience clarified for him the limits of reason within imperial politics. When Franklin arrived in France during the Revolutionary War, he did not possess formal diplomatic authority in the modern sense, yet he became one of the most effective diplomats in history. Official explanations often credit his charm and wit, but this understates his strategic awareness. Franklin carefully crafted an image of simplicity and wisdom, dressing plainly, cultivating the persona of a humble philosopher rather than a calculating envoy. This image resonated deeply in France, where Enlightenment ideals were admired and British power resented. What complicates this narrative is the extent to which Franklin consciously performed this role. He understood that France's support depended as much on perception as on policy. By embodying the virtues France wished to see in the American cause, Franklin made the revolution morally attractive. His correspondence reveals careful calibration, emphasizing American resilience while downplaying internal divisions and military weakness. Some historians argue that Franklin's greatest invention was not electrical theory, but political theater. Franklin's diplomatic success also relied on patience. He resisted premature commitments, waited for favorable shifts in European politics, and allowed events to strengthen his bargaining position. The American victory at Saratoga was crucial, but Franklin had already laid groundwork by cultivating French elites, scientists, and philosophers. When France formally allied with the United States, it was not simply a reaction to battlefield events, but the culmination of sustained influence. Franklin's views on secrecy further complicate his image. While he valued transparency in public life, he also recognized the necessity of discretion. He supported intelligence gathering, maintained confidential channels of communication, and understood that diplomacy often operated best away from public scrutiny. This does not suggest conspiratorial behavior, but it does reveal a pragmatic understanding of power. Franklin believed that openness without strategy could be as dangerous as secrecy without accountability. At home, Franklin's political thought reflected similar nuance. He supported representative government but distrusted rigid ideology. He favored compromise, incremental reform, and adaptability. During the Constitutional Convention, he was one of its oldest participants, yet among the most flexible. He acknowledged the Constitution's imperfections, urging delegates to accept it not because it was flawless, but because it was workable. This willingness to accept partial solutions contrasts sharply with his reputation as a moralist dispensing absolute wisdom. Franklin's personal life also resists easy categorization. He challenged social conventions, embraced pleasure, and rejected strict moralism. Some contemporaries criticized this as frivolity, but others saw coherence between his lifestyle and his philosophy. Franklin believed that human behavior was guided by incentives, habits, and context more than abstract virtue. His famous self-improvement projects were less about moral purity than about practical self-regulation. This psychological insight extended into politics. Franklin did not expect people or nations to act altruistically. He designed arguments that aligned interest with principle. In France, he framed American independence not only as just, but also as beneficial to French strategic interests. In America, he supported policies that balanced liberty with order, aware that excessive idealism could fracture the republic. His realism was not cynical, but empirical. Some historians have described Franklin as the most modern of the Founding Fathers. Unlike others, he did not seek moral consistency in every aspect of life. He accepted contradiction as inevitable and worked within it. This perspective allowed him to navigate scientific inquiry, international diplomacy, and domestic politics without being paralyzed by theoretical purity. It also made him harder to categorize. The question of whether Franklin was a secret genius depends on what is meant by secrecy. He did not hide his talents, but he did mask his intentions. He allowed others to underestimate him, believing that underestimated influence was more effective than overt authority. His power came from relationships, timing, and credibility, rather than command. Franklin's death prompted reflection across continents. In France, public mourning rivaled that of national heroes. In America, he was remembered as both a founder and a philosopher. Yet even in death, his legacy resisted simplification. Inventor, diplomat, writer, strategist, each label captures part of the man, but none fully explains his impact. The enduring significance of Franklin lies not in any single role, but in his ability to move between them. He understood that modern power operates through knowledge, reputation, and persuasion as much as force. His life invites uncomfortable questions about leadership in an age of information. How much influence lies in what is said openly, and how much in what is carefully implied? How often does progress depend not on purity, but on adaptability? Benjamin Franklin did not leave behind a doctrine or a system. He left behind methods, ways of thinking about human behavior, institutions, and power. Whether viewed as an inventor, a diplomat, or something more elusive, his legacy challenges the assumption that influence must always be visible to be real. In examining Franklin closely, we are left not with certainty, but with a deeper appreciation of how quietly transformative intelligence can shape history.